All righty. So for the topic for today's Multifamily Investor Nation webinar, we're actually going to be talking about hosting a successful investor dinner. Now, even though this seems very simple, I do hope that there are some intentional, minute details that we do just to make sure that we're paying attention to that I do think that makes a big difference. And so, I hope that there's at least one golden nugget that you take from this, and then also make it your own, because here at just Multifamily Investor Nation, what we're really trying to do is one, just educate, but then also to give you some ideas to create your own investor dinner and host your own cocktail parties, or whatever you may call it. So we're going to just talk through most frequently asked questions, different topics of conversation that we come prepared with over at passiveinvesting.com, some of the major focuses that we have for our investor dinners that want to drive success and really convert those investors, prospective investors, to become investors, what our format looks like, just because we want to be very efficient with our time and make sure it's all on board. And then also what happens afterwards. How do you still stay in touch with them and what that looks like? And then we'll also make sure that we have time for questions after too, just to make sure that we're granular into the details. So a little bit about myself. This is the first time you're listening to me, welcome. Thank you for hopping on. I'm one of the investor relations associates here at passiveinvesting.com. I joined the team in January of 2022. And since then I've raised 15 million in capital, a little over 15 million. And of that 15 million, 3 million plus, a little over 3 million plus have been from investor dinners. And that's been over the course of around 15 or 16 investor dinners since then. And so this is what I do. I wine and dine, and it's been a lot of fun, just like meeting people. But I will say this, the type of investor dinners that we do, this is not a lunch and learn. We don't have a formal presentation. This isn't like a panel where people are going to be asking you questions where you're just going to be standing up in front of the audience. And this really isn't a hardcore pitch either, where you're actually going through a deal. But what these investor dinners are really for is an opportunity to build trust and rapport with the people that are coming. And quite often, this might be the first time that they're meeting somebody from your firm in person. Time and time and again, like even at passiveinvesting.com, there are people that have been interacting and investing with us since 2018. Like, there are some of our first investors, but they've never actually met somebody from the firm in person. And so we have to make sure that experience and that first impression makes an impact, because they've been investing with us, right? And so understand that this is also just an additional touch point as well. This isn't supposed to replace any marketing strategies, and this isn't like just because you're hosting investor dinners does not mean that you're going to convert investors either. It's just an additional touch point. There's a lot of work that goes up to getting to this point to be able to host an investor dinner. But this is a great opportunity to just show how investors will experience working with you and partnering up with you. And so we're just going to be talking through date and location, some of our best practices, the type of the attendees that we look to invite, and then how many attendees as well, what we do to prepare for that dinner, the format, and then also what happens afterwards. So date and location. Typically, we're going to schedule it out 1 month out at the bare minimum. If you can schedule it out a little bit sooner, if you're getting a lot of traction onto let's say you posted in your newsletter and you get a lot of just people that are interested in coming, maybe get that at least minimum a month out. If you can do it earlier, that's great. It gives people time to plan, but at least a minimum month out. The dates that we typically host these dinners, it's typically at least days of the week. It's going to be between Tuesdays and Thursdays. We found that Mondays is a little bit too busy, where people are just catching up and starting the week. Fridays, everyone's already preparing for the weekend. And then on the weekends, typically these people have families or other plans. And so having between Tuesday to Thursday has seemed to be the most effective for us. Now, the type of places, as also too, in terms of location as well, we try and stay away from downtown. And reason being is typically traffic is pretty bad going into downtown, at least over here in California. And I've actually had some attendees where I hosted a dinner in downtown, but since it was in downtown, they were like, ooh, it's a little bit too busy out there. I don't want to drive all the way to downtown. I'd much rather go, to a suburb in, let's say, like La Jolla or something like, or Bellevue in Washington. So this was like in downtown Seattle, and there's just a lot of crime. And so downtown, it is a centralized location, but sometimes it may be just a little bit difficult just to get to those places. So just something to keep in mind when you're choosing these restaurants. Oh, Angel, yes, you will be getting a copy of these slides afterwards. I'll make sure to send it to Leah, our team, and it'll be sent out in a webinar. And then for restaurants, we like to choose steakhouses or something Italian. Steakhouses typically have the most broad range of food where everybody can enjoy. They have, of course, they have your steak, but then they also have some vegetarian options or chicken options or whatever. But it seems to just be the best all across the board. And then also the experience that comes within it as well. Del Frisco's and Fleming's are two of our favorite franchises that we like to go host dinners at, and invited club. So it used to be called Club Core. We've started to use Club Core for some of our dinners, but it's a business network. It's a network of just country or business clubs around the country. So if you are, let's say, partnered up, yes, it's exactly like the Tower Club over in Dallas. And so they have a bunch of different clubs all across the country where you can actually host dinners, and or even host networking events. And typically it's over here in San Jose, it's like at the top of a skyscraper. So it's a very cool experience just to be a part of, just because it's a little bit more exclusive. And they have it everywhere. So definitely look into invited clubs, formerly known as Club Core. I think that's also a great, Dan and Joe did an event there in 2019. It was awesome. Yeah, see, there you go. Tower Club, invited clubs. Definitely look into it. Room format. So we want to make sure when we are booking the rooms, it's first off, it's going to be around a $2,000 minimum food and beverage, just to let y'all know. And then also when you are booking these rooms, make sure that it's a one table layout. And I'll go through that a little bit on the next slide. But when you have a one table layout, it really makes sure that you have an inclusive conversation and you can control the conversation of where it's going to go. I only had one dinner where I went into the dinner and there were actually two separated tables, and it just made it difficult because then it turned into a presentation and I had to table hop just to have conversations with both sides and making sure that I'm engaged and listening and learning about these people. And I didn't really eat that much that night either, since I was just table hopping all the time. So make sure it's just in a one table format. I've included just some examples here of what our dinners would look like. But as you notice, though, the dinners aren't really that big. We typically like to target our attendance between 8 to 15 people, and that will include, let's say, their guests, spouses, significant other, etc. So the reason why we chose between 8 to 15 people, we saw that any attendance less than 8 people, it turns into an interview. You're just going to be sitting there and you're just going to be answering all of these different questions. But any attendance over 15 people, it's going to be a little bit too much where you can have a lot of just different side conversations, unless you have your partner with you, like let's say your business partner or somebody from your team that's with you, then you can sort of grow the attendance number. But if you're just one person that's hosting the dinner, anything over 15 just seems to be a little bit too much to control the conversation. And when we do have our attendees, we try and have this goal, this ratio between 50% current investor and then 50% new investors. And for the attendees that we're looking to have, we want to make sure that these are people that are been active with our newsletter, been active in talking with us, not someone that just joined our list and just joined to listen are just looking for a free dinner, because we've also had that as well. And it just comes off a little weird, as you know. And then also here on the right too, if you take a look here, this is just one of the this is what we put in our newsletter, just to let people know, like, hey, these are the cities that we're coming to, and we'd love to meet you if you're there. Now, before we get into the dinner, I mean, this is also really simple as well. Of course, arrive 30 minutes beforehand. You want to warm up. Typically what I like to do is I just like to get a drink, just because you're meeting a lot of new people, and especially for the first time. And so when you do go there, you warm up, get your conversation ready. Then this is actually really important. You want to pre-select your red and whites, and then set up the table with marketing materials. We usually set it up with like newsletters like this, or even offering memorandums. Hold on. Like this, just on the table, spread out, and it's not really in a very, and I guess you can, if you want to, just put it in each seat, but if you do that, it's going to also give off the idea that you're going to give a presentation and go through all of these marketing material. It's just for something for them to take home with them. And then also too, when you go into there, you want to definitely sit in the center of the table. I know some people like to sit at the head of the table, but when you sit in the center of the table, you really just get included with all of the conversation. So you really get all this control, and to be able to facilitate what questions are going on, and then involve other people into conversation. Sitting at the head, you might not be able to just talk to the other person at the other side of the table if it's a big table. So just something to keep in mind. And then also make sure you have appetizers ordered and prepared before the guests walk in, just because we've had so many different times where it just extends the dinner out, where you are having dinner, or you go in there, you order appetizers, everyone's talking and having a great time, and then you have to order entrees, and it just extends the dinner by like an hour or so. So definitely have that ready, already prepared and ordered and ready to go. So the dinner format: greet the guests as they walk in, take a seat, order entrees before introductions. This is really key, just because of the point that I made beforehand. If you do it before introductions, it gives them time to actually speak freely and not be interrupted by servers coming in. And then the next thing you know, like an hour later after introduction, not saying that introductions can take an hour, but they would, they might be hungry and you're like, dang, we haven't even ordered it. This dinner's going to be a long time. So make sure that their entrees are already ordered before going into introductions. And then when you go into the introduction, I usually say who I am, and then say something along the lines of like, welcome to our dinner. Thank you all for joining us. This is a time for us to connect with our community. And we see this truly as a time to mastermind, get to know each other, discuss what's going on, all over some delicious food. There are people here with plenty of experiences all across the board, both passive and active, where we can all benefit and learn from each other. So for this dinner, there's no real formal pitch or agenda. And so don't worry, I'm not going to ask for y'all to take your checkbooks out. And it's really just a time for us to connect. So some of you might not be familiar with each of us. So we're going to start with introductions. The reason why I say this and why it is not a dinner, like why it isn't a presentation, is just because it invites a more inclusive conversation. They don't feel like when they walk in, they're immediately just vetting you as an operator and in trying to build trust right away. This is just a very natural way to just build rapport and with just the people that are there. So when we do go these introductions, I go through name, how long you've been living in the space, and then their experience with passiveinvesting.com. So I usually ask, since passiveinvesting.com brought us all together, let us know if you're invested in a deal with us and what your experience looks like. And then if you decide to reinvest in multiple deals, let us know why you decided to do that. And when we do start with introductions, I always start with with a current investor. And this will make your job a lot easier. Well, especially if you've been performing well and that current investor, of course, likes investing with you as an operator. But it comes off as now this investor gives you that social proof and credibility that you are a good operator, because most often they will actually, there hasn't been a time where we've had a current investor not pitch us in front of everybody else just because they're telling them about their experience, because it's not really a pitch. They're just actually genuinely speaking about their, positive experience with you. And so when it starts off with really good energy with that one current investor, it's the rest of the introductions also tend to be very good. You don't want the first introduction to be short. You want to definitely start it off on a good note. So do your research with who's coming and then who you've already built a relationship with, and then have them start. And even if it's a plus, try and have them sit next to you so it doesn't look like you're specifically targeting them. You just, we'll start here and then we'll go around the table. Now, when we get into the conversations, honestly, the conversations vary, and every single dinner is so different. Some are a lot more business oriented, but then some are just a lot more based on rapport. Of course, like after you finish introductions and you go through the conversations, they're going to be talking about deal pipeline, asset performance, market outlook, what we anticipate the future to look like, business questions. And so definitely just be prepared for when that does happen. Especially now, right? And I mean, if you've been having these conversations with investors multiple times, it's just now, instead of over the phone, you're just saying it in person. So it's essentially just the same answers. But understand that investors attend because they want to learn about us, but we want to attend because we want to learn about them, not just pitch our deals or anything like that. One thing that I like to do is if I hear that there are people that have common interests, I always connect the two together, even if it's after the dinner, saying like, hey, you're invested here, you're invested here. I think you two would be great to just at least like connect and just have that conversation after the dinner. And then understand too, people love stories. And this is the bonus as well. So in this picture, if you can tell, I don't know if you can see my cursor, you have Dan right here, our director of investor relations, Rob. And then you have this super handsome fellow right here on the left. But to the right of Dan is actually Dan's son. And he's attended a couple investor dinners. And I don't actually think this is intentional. I think he's really just trying to show he's trying to show his son just the nature of the business. But I think it's a really cool and vulnerable point to say that when you do bring your kids or even a family member, it shows to everybody else that it's not just you that's investing in these relationships and in these deals. There is the sacrifice that the family also takes to investing in these deals. Like the family is also involved in the investment journey. And so it brings just an additional touch point and also additional conversation topic just to talk through, what it's like investing as a family, just because like that, I mean, typically like family is the purpose for all of these different investors. I mean, this couple right over here, they were actually having a baby and this was their first baby. And so they saw Caleb and they were able to just mesh and just have that initiative. What's the word I'm even looking for? First, like, they just were able to have a great conversation right off the bat. It was just a very easy conversation to have. So if you can bring somebody that you love to the dinner, just because it makes a difference. It really does. And that is also one of the reasons why I love working at passiveinvesting.com too, because I mean, I'm able to also bring, a family member as well. And it's it paints a nice picture. And then also, speaking of picture, make sure you take a picture of the group because you'd want that as marketing material just to send out to in your monthly newsletter. I've had plenty of people, once I take the picture, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be a part of the next newsletter. And I was like, yeah, that's why we take the pictures. And then post dinner, I usually follow up within 24 hours with an email and then include the group photo. If they're already familiar and active with us, I always reference the conversations that we've had and I make it more personal. So for example, there was an investor that was there where they had a big tomahawk bone steak, and they didn't finish it. And so, but they wanted to take the bone back for their little Chihuahua dog. And so I followed up with them and they actually sent me a picture back with the bone and then the dog. And it was just really cool just because, I mean, now I feel like we're building that relationship, right? And they're already investors with us anyways, just another additional touch point. And then if they're newer and they're part of the other 50%, reach out to establish a follow-up call to discuss their goals, opportunities, and really just get to know them a little bit better, more in a business-oriented call. And then this is a huge plus as well. And we just started implementing this, but there's this software called handwritten.com, or website called handwritten.com. And it's essentially just a robot that will write these little handwritten cards, and it'll make it look like you wrote it. And, when you get a handwritten card saying like, hey, thank you for coming to our dinner, we really appreciate your presence. It adds just a different level of, not necessarily comfort, but just another rapport building tactic, right? Because it's like, wow, this person took the time to send over a handwritten letter. And honestly, not many people are doing it now. So we've gotten a lot of just great feedback using handwritten.com. And this is typically what it looks like. And also you can go through different fonts as well. So if you don't really like this font, you can choose one that better fits your handwriting too. So it's a great platform. And then, that's essentially it. Then you keep nourishing it, but just from these steps and having those conversations, it's worked out very well. And there wasn't like I had to create a formal presentation at any way, shape, or form. It's really just learning about them because they've already had the presentation beforehand. They've probably already attended the webinar. They've probably already, done their research before, before even just attending the dinner. So, and also one thing I want to note too, even so the dinners, they can get pretty expensive, anywhere between $2,000 to $3,000. But if you think about it, if you just get one person to convert, I mean, typically minimums are anywhere between 50,000 to 100,000. One person is going to more than pay for what you've spent on the dinner. Food for thought.